Well, good morning, folks. This is a warning. I'm going to flip the camera around, so hopefully no one gets dizzy here. Just give me a second to flip that around. Hey, good morning, everyone. Well, thanks for joining us. I'm Ignacio De La Torre with the San Diego Bonsai Club Board, and you have no idea how happy I am that this is working. We're all very excited here. We're with Fred Miyahara, and we're at his home in San Diego on a lovely, sunny, drizzly San Diego morning. We know we've got people up and down the state watching us, so thanks for joining us. The board wanted to make sure that during this time, where it's been difficult for us to get together, that we at least offered a way to still learn about bonsai and figure out what we need to be doing right now with our trees. And June, there's no better time to talk about Japanese black pines, and there's no better expert than Fred Miyahara. Fred, thankfully, has allowed us to, he's going to be our first victim, guest speaker, and we're going to learn a lot today. We're going to talk about black pines, and we ask you that as we go through this presentation, post your comments, post your questions. Please understand a disclaimer, this is the first time we're doing this, and hopefully we don't have too many technical glitches. If we do, we're just sort of going to move through that. I do want to thank a couple of people. Our president, Sue Carter, and my wife, Pilar, were very helpful in doing a lot of testing. Having never done this, we needed to go through numerous tests, and they were both very helpful in doing that. And I want to extend a special San Diego warm welcome and thank you to Jason Saito from the California Bonsai Society and Daiichi Bonsai Kai. The CBS offered to clubs across the state to help them to get onto social media. Spoken with Jason a number of times. We've done some tests with him, in fact, out of LA and down to San Diego. So Bob Pressler and Jason, thanks so much for the support from the CBS. And Jason, thanks for all your help. Well, with that, I think we're going to go ahead and get started. And as I mentioned, we're with Fred Miyahara today. Fred has been one of the stalwart club members. He started bonsai in 1989, more than 30 years ago. And during that time, one of the things that he's picked up is really becoming an expert on Japanese black pines. And we're happy to have him with us. Again, we're thankful that he allowed us to visit him at his home and to step through this. So I'm going to flip the camera back around. I'm going to mic Fred, so you might hear a click here, but just give us a second. And with that, I will introduce, we'll welcome Fred and we'll get started. Fred, you're on.
Okay. Good morning, everybody. Happy to be here in this real sunny Southern California weather. It's pretty cloudy right now, but anyway, it's great because the other day we did a trial run and it was really hot, so I'm glad it's a little cool. But anyway, today we're going to talk about Japanese black pines and in particular the decandling methods. And why do we decandle pine trees? Basically to get better ramification and better balance on your pine trees. So there's all this kind of mystery and things that are written about decandling and what's the best method of doing decandling. I mean, most people read the 10-day method, and we'll go into that and explain why we do that type of thing. There's 2 or 3 different methodologies that are done for decandling. I think if you go on Jonas Dupeach's blog, Bonsai Tonight, he goes into very extensive detail on some of the different techniques of decandling. And so basically it's to balance the tree and to get more ramification. So what happens is when the spring candles come out, and you can see this pine tree here in the yard hasn't been touched yet. So we're going to talk about some of the methodology that we could do, and I'm just going to show you on this particular tree what that 10-day method is and whatnot. But all of it is to cut. These are what we call spring candles, and so we cut the spring candles so that we get a second flush of growth in the summertime, and that in the fall we would hopefully get a multitude of buds that come out, and out of those multitude of buds we would select normally 2 to be kept and the others to be cut off. And that's done in the winter, so or fall. There's 2 cycles that we do. We do summer, spring candle cutting, and then in the fall we reduce it to 2 and we pull needles. And so what happens is that exponentially we get that ramification that we're looking for. So when we cut a spring candle and we get multiple buds come out and we reduce it down to 2, then where we had 1 spring candle in year 1, in year 2 we would have 2, and then in year 3 we would have 4, and in year 5 we'd have 8, and then 16, and so you could see how it would quickly ramify a branch. So part of that is, when should we do all this? Basically what I do, and I study with Kenji Miyata, who's from Mr. Mitsuya. I'll go into that lineage a little bit later, but I learned from him, and so we cut everything usually around this time, from the second week, about the 15th to the 20th of June to the 1st of July. And a lot of people have a little very different variations. If you have cork bark pines, you want to cut them a little bit earlier, like late May, early June. If you have shohin pines, you want to go a lot later. You want to cut the candles somewhere around middle to end of July to the 1st of August. And a good source for that would be Tomohiro Masumi, who's in Kyoto, Japan, Kojuin Nursery. He's now the president of the Japan Shohin Association, and he's an expert at doing the pine trees. So, if you could look on his website or online with him, he'd be a good source. The origin of decandling, from what I understand, was came about by a little bit by accident. I think what happened was that there was an infestation of tip moth on the black pines, and if you know anything about tip moth infestation, the moth in the fall lays their egg inside the bud, and then as the eggs hatch and the larva grows, they'll eat around the bud and kill the bud, and the tip of the pine tree turns brown and dies. So Mr. Saiichi Suzuki, owner of Daijuan Nursery, cut off all those dead parts and noticed that he got new buds. And so from there, they started developing the black pines. From my understanding, the black pine was not the desired pine for bonsai. Red pines and white pines were more desirable until he started doing this type of technique. And then his son, Toshinori Suzuki, became very, very famous doing Japanese black pine. Their Daijuan Nursery, which is in Okazaki City in Aichi Ken. And so from there, Toshinori Suzuki had 3 apprentices that became very famous: Mr. Kubota, Mr. Kamiya, and Mr. Mitsuya. Mr. Kamiya is actually teacher for Boone, Manakitivi pot. So a lot of people know Boone, and Boone studied with Mr. Kamiya. Mr. Mitsuya's first apprentice was my teacher, Kenji Miyata. And his second apprentice was Harunobu Tokita, and his third apprentice was Kathy Shaner. I think most people know who she is. Dennis Makishima studied over there with Mr. Mitsuya. Dave DeGroat studied with him. Gordon Deeg, who's the chairman of the Lake Merritt, studied with him. So a good lineage for people that do that. In fact, when one of the early trips I went to Japan, I visited Daijuan, and it's the first time I got to see $1 million bonsai black pine. pretty impressive. So anyway, so that's kind of the lineage. So we'll go into the techniques that we use. So one of the things is a 10-day, 10-day, 10-day that everybody reads about and everybody talks about. So all that is that we take the small buds and we cut them first, and then wait 10 days and we cut the medium buds, and then wait 10 days and then cut the long buds. So we'll probably try to show you here on this yard pine where we could do that. One of the things that's very difficult for many people, including myself, was that what is a small bud and what is a medium bud and what is a big bud? A big bud is pretty noticeable, but what is a small and medium bud? So another technique that they use based on that 10-day, 10-day is that they do the bottom half of the bottom third of the tree first. They cut all the buds at that time, and then they wait 10 days, and then they do the middle, and then they wait 10 days, and they do the top. I think it's a lot easier for people to do that. There's also a method called the peg method, where they cut the small candles. They do everything the same day. They cut the small candles down to the base. They cut the medium candles where the peg is equal, the height of the peg is equal to the width. We'll try to show you here. And then the large buds, we use a peg that's twice as big. And the theory behind that is that because the pegs are not cut all the way to the bottom, that the bud will live on the stored carbohydrates for a while and do the same thing as the 10-day, 10-day, 10-day. My teacher cuts all the candles on the same day, so that's what I do. And so I cut all the candles on the same day, and then we readjust in the fall. So basically that's it, and then we have to do the balancing. So I'm going to just show you one of the methods. So when we come up here, we see a small candle. So this, like a candle like this, is considered small. So we'll cut this like now. And we cut it down at the base. Like that. So these are what we would consider small candles. And then we would wait 10 days and we'd cut the medium candles. So these would, right now on this tree, would be considered medium. What? Oh, okay. So these are the medium candles. So like this.
Yeah, perfect.
So we would cut those at the base. And do this, and then of course we had the big candles. So these are big candles. So we would cut those like that, and we would do that in a 10-day, 10-day sequence. Or we could cut the bottom branches first, and then wait 10 days, and then cut the middle branches, wait 10 days, and then cut the ones up there. The other method, where we do the peg method, is that we would take these small. Let's see where all my trash cans. We'd take the small buds and we'd cut them down like that, all the way down to the base. And try to cut them so that they're perpendicular, because if you cut them on an angle, then the bud will come out first on the lower part of the bud. So, and then this is a medium candle, so we would cut here and leave a peg. I don't know if you can see that, but this peg like that. And then on this one, this is a big candle, we would leave a peg like that. So that's basically, all the steps, all the different ways to do it, or we could cut everything all the same day, which we'll do on the small one now, and show that to you. Oh, so this is a tree that I purchased from my teacher, Mr. Miyahara, and so I will cut it in the manner that we do all the time. So I don't know. You want me to sit there, or you want me to? Is this okay? Okay. So we will cut all these this way. So we would cut these all down at the base. And we cut to where the candles were, the needles were from last year.
Brett,
Yes.
Neil had a question. Is it too late to decandle at some point?
The question was, is it too late to decandle at some point? The answer is yes. I think what happens is that if you wait too long to cut the candles, then the fall buds will not come out readily, and it'll weaken the tree. It'll make the buds shorter, but it would also make the tree weaker, and then you'll have to readjust it in the fall if that happens. So, like I say, I think the time to do the candle cutting is between middle June to the middle of July would be the best time to do them.
And Fred, Neil had another question about the optimal time to apply fungicide on spring needles or spring candles.
Well, that question, it would be very difficult for me to answer. If you use a systemic, I think it might be okay, but if you don't, I would not use a systemic on the tree after cutting the spring candles. But that's just my feeling on that. So one thing that I didn't point out is when you're decandling, there are two types of candles that come out. One is a adventitious bud, and then there's a needle bud. So the first year of a needle bud, and I don't see any on this tree, you cannot decandle, because if you decandle, there'll be no fall buds that come out. So you actually have to have only adventitious buds.
Can you spread that out as you're cutting it to show I don't know if there's any way to
What?
spread that out.
Well, I'll pull needles, but and then they can see it a little better. But I don't know if I can spread it out for you. So when you're cutting these candles, you should always grab the branches from the bottom. Never go in from the top, because you can break the needles, and then you would have damaged needles. So be careful when you do that. So then when you're cutting it, always kind of lift it up from the bottom, not from the top. And then always try to, like I said earlier, try to cut them perpendicular to the vertical, because if you cut them on an angle, let's say you cut this on an angle like this, the bud here will come out faster than the bud up here that's left, the peg that's left here. So you got to be careful about that. And so the pine tree is apical, so when we're trying to balance this, it's always the bottom is weaker and the top is much stronger. So you always have to be cognizant of that. And the outside is stronger, the inside is weaker. So when you cut these candles, then you have to then go back and pull needles so that they will be better balanced.
Fred,
Mm-hmm.
Nico would like to know how old the pine tree should be before you can start decandling.
It depends. Depends on how healthy the tree is and whatnot. You know, it's different. I was talking earlier that pine trees are maybe the most difficult bonsai to do, in that no two pines are alike. Even though we use the basic method, we do the candle cutting. You know, some are weaker, some are stronger. They're like children. You know, we have to treat them kind of the same, but bringing them up and rearing them, we might have to like kick one in the seat of the pants, the other one might have to give them a big hug or something. And so pine trees are the same way. So to answer that question, it really is difficult. It depends, but I would think generally you wouldn't have to cut candles until the tree is at least 5-6 years old. Until then, I think you could let them go fairly wild. The thing that you might do besides cutting the candle is that you just might cut different parts of the branches off to make the tree a little more balanced, but not specifically cutting candles per se.
Uday has a question.
Mm-hmm.
He's trying to make a shohin pine.
Mm-hmm.
It has lots of new growth and new branches are very thin, and wants to know, should I wait until they thicken up before decandling?
Yes and no. I mean, it depends on what he's trying to achieve. If he's trying to get a thicker branch, then you might want to let the branch grow wild, and then you might want the bud to produce another bud that produces another bud, so that it would get longer. So in this case, if I wanted this one to grow longer here, I would just leave this bud and have the bud come out on top of that. And that way the tree would get bigger and stronger and longer. So yeah, you wouldn't necessarily cut candles on certain parts of the tree.
Questions are coming in fast and furious.
Okay.
So Janet would like to know, how do you differentiate an adventurous bud from a needle bud?
Oh, adventitious bud?
Oh, adventitious.
Well, an adventitious bud will have needles underneath like this. A needle bud will be coming out of the middle of two needles.
Can you show us here?
Yeah, well, I don't have a needle bud. I don't know if I can find one, but if I can, let me see if I can find it. I don't think there's one on this one, so let me look at this guy. I don't see any. Maybe this yard tree has one. Let me look. Oop. Well, Janice, I don't think I can find one for you.
Susan would like to know, if buds have no leaves, should they be left alone?
Yes, they should be left alone. If they have no needles underneath, is that what you're talking about? The needles under here? Is that what she's saying?
Probably.
Yeah, then you should leave them alone. You shouldn't cut it. Because then nothing will grow if you don't have That's what's wrong with the needle bud, because it got two needles and the bud's forming inside those two needles. So if we cut it, there'll be no needles left. So that presents a problem. So I can't find one for you, Janice. So sorry.
George would like to know, when a candle is really larger than others, should you break the larger candle in half prior to cutting candles?
Only when it's still without needles showing, before the green. If it's a kind of beige, whitish color, you can that's what we call metsme, and that's when you take it and break it in half. Yes, you can do that, but you can't. You have to do that before the needles emerge, before the green needles emerge.
Like you're going into the interior of the tree.
Yeah.
Wendy would like to know, What is the best way to thicken the trunk on a JBP?
Well, the best way to thicken the trunk is put it in the ground. So this particular tree was grown from seed. It's about 20 years old now, 18 to 20 years old. The first 8 years it was pot grown, and then 3 years in the ground, and then we dug it back up and then cut it. It was a big trunk here. We cut it, and so we're leaving this on to heal this particular wound that's in here.
Can you show that once again?
Yes. So this tree was quite large when we dug it up, and so we cut it off, and so we have a big wound here. So we're letting this escape to help heal this big scar. Right now it has a tree seal on it, the grade tree seal.
How long will you leave? How long will you leave the leader on that top branch?
Until we get the better taper, and when this starts to heal over, then we'll cut it off, and probably go to this guy for the apex. These two. So this will probably be cut off here, and then this would take off as the apex, and then we would develop it here. So you could see that was done on this particular tree a couple times. So there's a scar here that's healed over. It's almost rolled over. I don't know if you can see that, but right here. And earlier there was a bigger scar that both of these, and they're starting to roll over.
Can you show that a little bit?
Sure.
Very perfect.
So they really have to have this roll over on all around the tree.
Can you talk about how to ensure that it rolls over?
Yeah, a lot of people make a big mistake on the pine trees. They cut it straight across, and then they don't chisel this area out in here so that the tree has a chance to roll over. So if you, like this one will never really roll over. It can't roll over because this is too high. The edge is too high. This actually has to be cut down a little smaller so that these can roll over. And so I find out many of the students, they don't chisel this out enough for it to roll over.
And by chiseling out, you mean almost like a crater?
Well, yeah, I mean, in the old days, like I was explaining, they would actually make a kiss. I don't know if, do you have a pen? Or maybe Tricia has a pen. Thank you. So let's say you have a wound that's kind of like this. This is side. This is from the front. So right here, people need to chisel this so that it's actually lower, like this. But what they do is they chisel here, but then they actually go like this, and they leave a point here. And so that when this thing rolls over, it can roll over like this. And then as it gets here, they cut this kiss off. Now, right now, a lot of people, they just cut it and they round it like this. So but you have to get inside this cadmium layer so that it can roll over. I don't know if people can understand that, but that's basically what we have to do. And then once we cut all the candles, then we will pull some of the needles too to balance it. You know, pine trees are what we call apical or whatever. So they're top dominant and outside dominant. So the top and the outside are much stronger than the bottom and the inside. So in order to balance that, we have to actually pull some needles. So, and then sometimes if we have to, if there's we need some more strength in balancing on the inside, maybe we won't cut some of these candles that are inside. So like this one, maybe we might leave it, you know, but because it's this one in here like this. So it's growing on top, so we know that this is not going to be used in the future anyway, but we could grow it for strength so that these on the side will get a little bigger. So we could leave, you know, we could leave some at the bottom to kind of help. Like this one's pretty small, so we'll probably not cut that.
Can you show that one?
Yeah. And then this one is pretty small, these two, so we probably won't cut those, probably leave them. So in order to balance it a little bit by not cutting it, then we would take this and we would probably pull some needles. And that's what makes these guys so hard and so complex, is that we do stuff like this after we told you we cut all the candles, and then we don't cut all the candles. And so, you know, a lot of times we do this and then we just say, you know, so here's another one that's very small. It has no needles underneath it, so I think that's what Susan was asking. We would not cut this candle.
Okay.
So,
Can you show that one?
yeah. Right here.
So I have first a request and then a question.
Okay.
And the request is if you would repeat the questions because they can't hear my voice.
Oh, okay.
All right.
Yes.
So then there's a question here, and this is Uday asking back about the concave or working the scar. He said one should make a concave cut. That's the question. Should it be a concave cut?
No. The question was, when we make the cut for the scar, should we make a concave cut? And the answer is usually no. The only time you would try to make a concave cut like that is when it's on the inside of the curve, because then you don't want to bulge. But most of the time, if it's on the outside, like these are, we would actually want it to bulge out, not in. So we don't want the scar to heal with the indentation. We actually want it to heal with the outside curve. So I would never use like a knob cutter. So like I say, I would use the chisel and chisel all the way down in here on the edge, make sure it gets to the cambium layer, and then leave this either straight or with a little mound so that it'll heal with a little roundness to it rather than an indentation.
And Fred, if you can repeat this, how deep should you go into that as you carve out? How much would you remove?
Well, I think the question was, how much of this would you remove? I would cut until I see the cambium, the green part of the live tissue, exposed before I stop. So I would carve this until that green part is there. Then they'll have a chance to roll over. And I think that's one of the really basic mistakes I see in people doing pine trees. And by not being able to heal that scar. So basically, we're about done.
Fred, can you talk about needle balancing, what that next step would be?
Yeah, well, we're going to do that right now. So what happens is that, you know, when I was first started, we were never taught to pull needles except in the fall. And of course, when we started studying with Mr. Miyahara, he pulled needles to balance it. So on the top, like when we have these bigger needles like this, we would take and get them down to like 4 to 6 pairs. So
And Fred, is that 4 to 6 pairs
on the top,
just the top?
just the top.
Okay.
And then as we go down the tree, then we would leave a little more, but I mean needles.
And Fred, why are you leaving different sets of needles, different numbers, pairs?
Because it's like the 10-day, 10-day, 10-day. The top is always stronger, the middle is a little bit weaker, and the bottom is very weak. So by doing that, we again balance the strength in the whole tree. And hopefully then the new set of buds that will come out with more uniform length and more uniform strength. And so the later you cut, the shorter obviously your needles get. So the thing is,
because there's less of a growing season?
There's less of a time to do that. But the one thing you have to remember is that it could get so short that it won't grow, and then you're in a little bit of trouble. So so this one is like we didn't cut this bud because there's nothing down here. So anyway, and then we didn't cut this bud here on the inside because it's. So we'll pull needles. And always pull the needle up and not down, because if you pull it down, you have a tendency to tear the bark.
Can you show that again, Fred?
So when you're pulling needles, always pull the needle toward the way it's growing, this way. This way. And it doesn't matter if you leave the fascicle or not. A lot of people say, oh, you have to leave the, you have to cut the fascicle or whatever, but you do not.
The fascicle is the sheath?
Yes.
At the bottom?
The sheath, yes. So when we have something like this, we just pull this way. And the fascicle is this little white thing here. So whether it's I'll get you another one. Well, this one, see this one, the fascicle was left on, so let me pull that off. So this is the fascicle that this was inside. So whether that stays on the tree or comes off with the needle, it has no bearing. So you don't have to take it off, you don't have to have it on there.
Susan has a question.
Okay.
And we'll repeat it.
Yes.
What fertilizer do you use and on what schedule?
The question was, what fertilizer do I use and on what schedule? Very good question. I use a product called either Plant Tone or Holly Tone. If I can try to get it, it's a Spoma company. It's a very mild organic fertilizer. It's like 532 or something like that, 534. And I started applying it in January for my trees here in San Diego. And I feed until right now. I feed as much as I can. I know Jonas uses tamaki, which is a Japanese rapeseed cake. And he said he starts in February and he puts a few on, and every week he puts a few on every week until candle cutting time, when this whole bottom is full of fertilizer. So I don't go to that extreme, but I do use some other fertilizers. That time I use Dr. Earth. Mats Takanashi used to say, well, the tree likes to eat too, but they don't want to eat hamburgers every day. So I try to vary some of it. I use Dr. Earth. I use sometimes a little bit of liquid Miracle Grow. I know some people put Miracle Grow on every week, and their tree seems to be pretty healthy. So as long as you feed it quite well, and then when we cut the candles like this, then we don't feed again until I don't feed again until the fall. And then once I started pulling the buds and whatnot like that, then I will start to feed a little bit, and then I would start feeding again in earnest in January.
So, question from George.
Okay.
He'd like to know, when is the best time to wire?
The question was, when is the best time to wire pine tree? The best time to wire pine tree would be in the fall to winter. So that would be the optimal time to do that. You really don't want to wire a tree when it's growing because it bites in a little bit too quickly, and you'd have to take it off and put it back on. So when the tree is going into dormancy, it's probably the best time to wire.
Fred, what is the, if you can repeat this, what's the importance of dormancy?
What's the importance of dormancy? I don't know. I guess the tree needs to sleep a little bit, just like we need to sleep a little bit. So if we don't get that chance to sleep, and that kind of makes it hard in San Diego because it stays so warm so much that a lot of times the tree doesn't have a chance to sleep as much. And so it's kind of like, us getting sleep deprivation. It will weaken the tree to some extent. So it's better if you living in a little bit colder climate, or you live in like Ramona or Julian and places like that where it gets a little colder. Unfortunately, my place doesn't get anywhere. The coldest it seems to get in the last 5 years is like 38. So it never gets to freezing or frost. So it'd be much better if it was colder, a little bit colder here.
Fred, is there anything else you want to share? Maybe ask for more questions. Are there any more questions?
Are there any more questions? We'll go into after I get this done, and then we'll I have a little quiz, and so if you guys want to get a piece of paper and a marker or something, or a pen, it's very simple because it's only true and false questions. There's some other questions, but it entailed having pictures of the pine and whatnot like that, so it's not conducive to us to be doing it on air. But we certainly can do the question and answer one. So if you go and get a piece of paper and we go ahead and do that, then we'll do that in a few minutes once I finish this.
Do you want to do it while you're doing that?
Well, it's kind of hard for me unless you want to do it. I can't read this and I can't do this at the same time, so I'll wait.
For questions and you get questions.
Okay.
So Susan wants to know how should the sacrifice branch be treated the same as the rest of the tree?
If it's a sacrifice branch, then it should be, would you repeat that question?
Sure. How should the sacrifice branch be treated the same as the rest of the tree?
Okay. The question is, how should the sacrifice branch be treated the same as the rest of the tree? My answer to that is no. When we cut all these candles and we thin out the needles here, I won't touch up here. I would leave it just like this because I want all that strength to go up there to heal that wound. So the answer is, in my opinion, no. So this is kind of like watching paint dry, or somebody doing wiring in the class, but this is, and I don't have to continue to do this, but then you get the idea that we have to pull these needles to balance everything.
Fred, why don't we move to the next step? I think we're
That's right. So basically this is kind of how the thing should look. It needs to pull a little more needles here, but you can kind of get the idea of what we're going to do. This one, like I said, was pot grown and then field grown for about 3 years and then taken out, and it's been like this for the last like 6 or 7 years. So that way we're able to get more girth on this trunk faster. And so, and this is closer to a Yatsubusa type pine. You notice that the needles are shorter anyway than that one. And that's just a variety of this pine. So, I mean, we would do the same thing. We would just cut all the candles. But as far as I'm concerned, I will not cut a couple of the sacrifice branches. So I think later on that I'm pretty sure that this is going to be my apex. So
Fred?
yes.
Pilar would like to know, for those who are new to bonsai, is a black pine a good tree to start with?
The question was, I'm new to bonsai, and is black pine a good species to start with? The answer is no. It's probably the most difficult tree to do. I mean, we have, experts, good friend John Jackson, who's been in the club for 40 plus years, doesn't own a black pine because he said they're too hard. They are probably the most difficult tree to do as a bonsai. So yeah, the answer is I would not. I mean, even though we have a workshop every March or so, we have pine trees, and I know people take the class, and we've tried to do a lot of follow-up later, and one year we really kind of asked people to bring their pine trees back, and out of the 10 that we had, only one was left surviving. So it's a difficult tree, and normally it costs a lot more money than a lot of the other trees. So this particular tree here was purchased, and this was $3,000. So anyway, I wouldn't want a beginner to have a tree like that and then kill it. So this one was done from seeds, so I would say it was 20 cents. 20 cents and 20 years later, but anyway. But that's a good question. But unfortunately, people try to do it because the pine tree is considered like the king of the beasts. It's the species that everybody admires, but it's also probably the most difficult. So it's really hard, and I would not. I would say that. Well, to give you my own experience, when I first joined the club, I fell in love with the pine tree, and I remember one of the first trips I took was to Bruce Hisayasu's house, where we purchased. The club used to go there every year and purchase pots, but he also had trees. And back in 1989, I purchased a pine tree for $150, which is more money than I should have even tried to spend on any kind of tree. And within 6 months, I had killed it. So, and part of it was I obviously overwatered, and because I was so concerned about killing the tree, I watered it, and I probably drowned it, and it got root rot, and it ended up dying. So. that was my first experience. And then I was fortunate enough in 1991 to go study with Mr. Ishii, Mas Ishii at Shikugo-en. And I was fascinated by his grafting and Kishu Shinpaku onto San Jose's. And so I kind of stopped doing pines. Every pine I bought, I killed. And so it wasn't until 1997 that I ventured back into the pine world. So I had been in bonsai for about 8 years, and I kind of knew a little bit, and I was afforded a GSBF student grant, and I took it with Dennis Makishima, who had studied with Mr. Mitsuya in Japan. And so I did a year-long study with him, and I did one in February where we did the candle cutting, the needle pulling and the type of balancing that we do. And then I saw him in June and we did the candle cutting, and then again in November when we did the fall pruning. And then after that I studied a couple years with Bill Castellan, who was a student at Dennis's, and also studied with Boone Manakitivipa, and I actually took a year-long study at El Dorado Bonsai, which was a bonsai school in Placerville run by Dolly Fazio, and it was conducted by Kathy Shaner. And then I had the good fortune of meeting Kenji Miyata in 2000, and he did a series of workshops in California, sponsored by GSBF, Golden State Bonsai Federation, and I got to visit his house in Toyohashi. It was like unbelievable, his pine trees there, and of course he took me to Mr. Mitsuya's, and he took me over to Daijuan, where I got to see my first $1 million pine tree. And I was hooked, and so since they were so good at doing pines, I've been studying with Kenji since 2002. So about 18 years now I've been studying with him. And he's now in Atlanta, Georgia, and has lots and lots of pines for sale. If you low 5 figures to high 6 figures. Oh, you want me, what? Oh, the quiz? Okay. So you don't want me to finish this?
Well, we're at an hour. I don't know
Oh,
how large
okay.
this is going to be.
Okay. Okay, so if everybody has their pen and pencils, we have some quizzes here. So this is all about candle cutting. So we'll try to figure out how much you know about and I don't know if I should give you the answers first or do it later.
We could put them up on the website and they could look them up.
Okay.
Tell them, or?
Yeah, I'll tell them later. Okay, then it says candle pruning has a result of increasing the small branches and twiggings. True or false? The next one is, one of the results of candle cutting is bringing the tree's condition into balance. True or false? If you've been listening to some of this stuff we've been saying, you could answer some of these from today, I think. Candle pruning has an effect of shortening the needles. True or false? For the tree, bud cutting is a severe experience. True or false?
Well, we got people answering online.
Prepare for candle cutting. Pruning by heavy fertilizing. Make sure the tree is in good condition. True or false? Even if the branch structure has gone as far as it can develop, instead of then focusing on rushing the development of short needles, it is better to make the main goal balancing the bud strength. In case of two trees that have been placed on the same bench and have the same strength, the interior buds of the tree whose branches spacing is overcrowded will grow out more than the other tree whose branches are more opened up and less crowded. I'm getting all these head shakes, no or yes, from my camera guys. It is important conduct mekiri every year without fail. And mekiri is, me means bud or eye, and kiri means to cut. So they're saying, is it important to conduct candle cutting every year without fail? If you only want to fatten the branch, it is best not to prune any of the shoots on that branch. In the case of where one wants to fatten the trunk, it would be okay to do candle cutting. In a year in which one transplants a tree, if the bud extensions are good, then you can skip candle pruning. That's kind of a hard one, but anyway. Since one wants to make the length of the needle somewhat longer, it's best to delay the candle cutting season a little bit longer, a little bit later. With regard to judging bud strength, do not consider just the size, but also the thickness of the stems. Basically, with regard to bud pruning, sequential bud pruning, it is best to conduct by beginning in the lower interior branches and working your way towards the head of the tree. I think we already talked about that. But in Shohin bonsai, pruning is conducted earlier than the larger bonsai. Do you want me to give them the answers? I thought, huh?
No, I think I'm afraid we're going to run out.
Do you want me to keep going? In case of a finished Shohin bonsai, when caring for developed trees without distinction, candle pruning is done at a single time. More than black pine, the red pine, well, I should skip that because it's a red pine thing. So, 3-time bud pruning is, depending on the condition of tree, divided into 2 parts. First, the strong buds are cut. Secondly, pruning is conducted on the weaker buds. The 3rd time, the buds emerge from the first pruning are cut again. True or false? When the difference between the strong and the weak parts of the tree are exaggerated, it would be more effective to conduct a 3-time cut instead of a 2-time cut. For the Yatsubusa variety of pine, bud pruning is not necessary. Yatsubusa is a smaller, shorter needle, more like this. This looks more almost like a Yatsubusa, where the needles are shorter and thicker. So anyway, basically in cold areas, it's best to conduct bud cutting earlier. On trees on which branches are overcrowded, it is good to candle prune and thin out small branches at the same time. On strong buds, if you remove all the old needles, it will restrain the growth of the bud. The old needles are, the needles are here underneath where the bud is growing. On strong buds, if you remove, that's the same question. On the strong buds, especially, new needles are also removed. We kind of had that right over here, but.
Let's do one more question.
Okay. And the last one is on the tree where the strength is declining and bud cutting cannot be done, one would still want to do a judicious needle pruning. True or false?
I think we should post this on the web and let people go get the answer.
So anyway, you guys can write all this thing down, and maybe when we get together, or we can do it on the website or something, we will post those answers for you. Or you could go to Kathy Edgar, because she has a cheat sheet. She has all the answers. She told me she was going to just whiz through this quiz. So anyway, I think that's it for today, and I hope everybody learned a little bit about pine pruning and decandling, and hopefully we can do this again in the future with some other guests. Thank you very much.